Well, the project I probably hated to do most is...
But if that doesn't happen, I think Old School's going to be here for ages and ages.
This is the new golden era, right? We are living in it right now.
Hello everyone and welcome to the official Old School RuneScape podcast, where we get to chat shit with JMods and creators alike, and
we get to know the person behind the crown.
Love it. I'm your host, Mod Ayiza, joined by my other host,
Mod Sween.
And we have a fantastic guest on with us today who is...
Me!
Who are you?
Mod Kieren.
Welcome, Mod Kieren. Or Kieren. I like that you chose your name to also be your mod name. It makes it very simple. For those who are watching and listening back home, do you want to maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, Kieren? What do you do here at Old School, Jagex on the Old School team?
Currently, nowadays, the Associate Design Director
Ooh.
for Old School. Ooh. I've got a team of like 18 designers, I think, nowadays, that I'm leading, I'm guiding, directing them, and coming up with a lot of the ideas that we want to put into the roadmap, and then communicating to that team, this is what I want to achieve. So my role looks a lot different to what it was back in 2015 when I first joined. So yeah, it gives you some sense of the time frame. It's like 9 years now, which is kind of terrifying. And my role day to day is very different to what it used to be, where, you know, you go back to like things like Inferno. I'm sure we maybe talk about some of these things. I'm actually coding and designing this thing directly. And nowadays I'm sort of directing and advising, guiding the team as well. So it's quite a different experience, to be honest, but I do get to enjoy a lot of what I do.
Well, that's good. I'm glad that you enjoy it, at least. I was about to say, like, it doesn't sound as fun as when we used to just get together at the pub, a few pints, and design bosses. I think the Theatre of Blood was pretty much all exclusively done at the pub around the corner. That was a good time.
To be fair, I still get to have a lot of that stuff, but it's almost like I get to have all my fingers in every pie. Okay. Right? So in some sense, in that sense, it's like a positive thing. But there's times where it's like, yeah, I do love sitting down and being able to crack on a project for several months into the details, but that's the level I don't really touch anymore.
No, it's someone else's pie. All these pies are someone else's. You have a little bit. You can't have your own.
Yeah, it's like I'm nibbling on the crust of somebody else's pie. That is the metaphor we've chosen to go with for some reason.
I like it.
I'm gonna stick with it for the entire hour.
Kieren is the pie crust nibbler.
Hell yeah. But it's interesting because, you know, when it comes to something like Tombs of a Massacre, yes, I didn't hands-on design any of the bosses, but I was talking to the leads of that project extensively in terms of setting out, this is what I want to try and achieve with this project, and then discussing back and forward, and then obviously playtesting, giving advice as we go. Mod Arcane's constantly coming to me, asking for ideas or asking me to check on what I think of his ideas. And so I'm helping to still shape and form these projects at a level where I can almost get involved with most of them, rather than having to go into code and flesh out their mechanics precisely. Yeah. So it is a bit different. It has its own challenges, because all of a sudden a lot of my skill set has to be about communication with others. It's me trying to communicate an idea that's in my head, and having somebody else that understand it isn't always straightforward. A lot of these projects come out slightly different to maybe how you imagined it to begin with, because they've got their own vision.
Too. Yeah,
and I want to let them create their own vision. That's the whole point. Why would we hire experts into the team, people with their own skill sets, their own creative abilities, if we're not wanting to use them? So there is a need to have that balance as well.
I love it. I love the fact that you joined in 2015 so long ago. Now you're Superstar Design Director, and you've kind of come from QA, going into content dev, made some banging content, and now you're like, you know, you're essential part of Old School's leadership team. What a story to tell. But let's go way, 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 way back. Yeah. So let's go back before the 2015 QA stuff. What were you doing before that?
I didn't actually know what the hell I wanted to do if you go that far back, really. I was doing, before I joined Jagex, I was in education. I was doing university. I was studying mathematics, and I did sort of an integrated master's course in mathematics at Newcastle University, which was like 4 years. And maths was always my subject at school. It was always the thing I just excelled at naturally, so it made sense for me to just carry on down that path. I know loads of people are going to be listening thinking, I hate maths. Yeah. And so many people do. It's hard. It is often like generalized to the point that you don't really know, well, what's the point of algebra? How many times have you heard people say that? But I always enjoyed it. But university, I'd stand by it and still say it to this day, it's the hardest thing I've ever done. And it's not to say the job I do now is easy, but especially third and fourth year of that degree, it was like, it killed me. I struggled so much with that.
Different pressures, and the university, you kind of like, it's largely on you to do to finish your degree, whereas the job now, you're surrounded by team and you're working together for a product rather than just, I'm trying to finish this qualification.
There's purpose to it.
Yeah.
We produce content, hundreds of thousands of players play it and enjoy it and give you feedback. Doing a degree kind of feels like a means to an end, right?
Sure.
I'm doing an exam or I'm doing this dissertation project just to satisfy somebody who's going to look at it and review it and tell me if I scored high enough. So it kind of feels pointless, right? There's no real purpose to it. But it was hard. Like, lots of degrees probably don't push you as hard as mine did. But I didn't have the ability to go out and party every weekend and that sort of thing because we just didn't have time. It was genuinely so much coursework, so many exams, and it was non-stop. It was 9 till 5 some day, like 5 days a week I was doing in lectures, and then you'd go home and have coursework to do. And it hit me. I struggled with that demand. Like, I didn't have the mentality for it at all. I would struggle. I'd be up stupid o'clock at night, or my sleeping pattern would be all over the place. I was struggling with my mental health, dealing with it all at that time. But I managed to just push myself through it. In hindsight, I'm like, yeah, I'm glad I did it.
Yeah.
But if I went back in time, I probably wouldn't still.
Okay.
Because it was just that difficult for me. I struggled so much.
Everything you did led you to this podcast right here, right now.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's like, I can't really have regrets, but it was tough. And I don't feel like I was built for it. Yeah, I see some of the people on the course I was with, and obviously some of them just managed to rattle through it and just deal with it and take it in stride. But like, I couldn't deal with the demand. It felt like you never had a break. It was unrelenting ability, and I just couldn't deal with that sort of level of workload.
So if anyone is kind of like getting into university application stages, listening to this right now, and they're thinking like, maths, I kind of love maths.
This is the
numbers.
confidence boost that they needed.
This is what I wanted to hear.
Were you by any chance distracted during your course at all?
So at the same time, I mean, certainly in the earlier parts of university, so like, as I was saying, it was getting hard, especially third and fourth year, and I was in a mental health rut and everything. Mm-hmm. It was more like the first, second year of university when I was also extensively playing RuneScape and also running a YouTube channel. So for anybody who doesn't know, I was making YouTube videos for a little while on a channel called Fairy Tales RS. I was doing videos almost every day or every other day for a decent stint. That was mostly through first and second year of university. And that probably more than the degree had a huge stake in me progressing to where I did in terms of joining Jagex and that being a path that felt open to me. I might not have even realized that. It was by doing YouTube that allowed me to meet various people. I've been invited to Jagex multiple times to play test things. So I was like,
very cool.
Things like that do lead to you getting contacts and knowing the right people. And that is what really showed me that this was a path that I could actually go down. I might not have even ever contemplated applying if I didn't do that. So yeah, it's amazing little things and how they make a difference to your life.
What else were you thinking of doing with your maths degree if it wasn't kind of Jagex? Were there any other like career paths in mind? Was it staying in academia? What kind of thing were you thinking about?
Doing the degree had shown me I don't want to stay in academia. That is for sure. Mm-hmm. I applaud the people who went on to do PhDs because, Jesus, that was not for me. It would have really just, my life would have been in tatters. Yeah. I couldn't have dealt with it at all. But I didn't really know. I mean, I sort of had the attitude that like maths is so open. Essentially,
yeah, you just kind of walk into anything.
Do mostly anything I want with it.
It's a smart subject.
Yeah,
I did a dumb subject, so I couldn't walk into anything. But you did a smart one.
What was the dumb subject?
English literature.
Fair enough.
There are audible gasps from the audience that are watching us.
Out the corner of my eye, I see someone going.
Sween has made an enemy today.
As a maths guy, hated English lit.
Yeah,
so I can't disagree. But yeah, I mean, I was thinking of stuff like going into teaching, potentially. But everything I looked into that told me, like, that's a terrible career choice. I'll hate it. I just wanted the 6 weeks off that you get, get off in summer. But the idea of having to, like, deal with children every day, oh, God, no way.
Like being a community manager.
Hey.
Touche.
Snappers.
I'm not going to rise to that bait. I love working in community management. I guess actually, we're probably going to jump around a whole bunch of different topics here, but seeing as we've just mentioned community, and I still want to understand more about how you went from, obviously content creator, maths whiz, to hating math as the course, to then Jagex. But let's just jump straight into community right now, right? We work really closely with the community as a whole. You've been a creator yourself. You said that you managed to come in and you've seen Jagex yourself before you joined. You've met creators, you've met players. What's that been like for you as a whole experience?
The landscape's so different nowadays compared to when I was doing YouTube videos. I mean, you go back that far, I think YouTube had only just brought in ad revenue and all that sort of stuff. So it was really early. It didn't feel early at the time, but it does. Crazy looking back now. Like, it's 2024. I was doing YouTube videos 2011. That's only like 5-6 years after YouTube was released, I think. It's scary, to be honest.
It's scary to think that was 13 years ago.
I was very fortunate that I met the guys who did RuneShark videos, James and Simon, and their channel was probably one of the biggest on the RuneScape space and on YouTube at the time. And we chatted a lot. We were really good friends, essentially, and hung out all the time. And that really was what helped propel my channel in that time frame. And we'd meet up. That was my excuse for first going to RuneFest, is we met up and went to RuneFest.
Nice.
I think it was 2013, I think, was the first time we actually went, because there wasn't a RuneFest in 2012. And that really then got me much more involved with the community. I met so many people, other people who were doing YouTube at the time, even though I'd mostly stopped by that point. And that just showed to me, like, as soon as going to RuneFest, you realize, oh my God, this game is crazy for the amount of impact it's made on people. And seeing it all come together at these events was amazing. And forever then, I was like, I'm going to RuneFest every single year. And obviously I have. And then as staff since I joined Jagex as well.
Yeah.
But it just shows to me why Old School needs to operate the way it does. The way we work with the community, talk to the community. Because at the end of the day, most of the team, myself included, were the community when we joined. A lot of people have come from that background. And we don't make the game for myself. We make it for the players, and we don't want to be egotistical or arrogant about it and say we know better, we are game designers. At the end of the day, we're looking after this product, right? We're looking after it for the players. We're curators. Old School existed before, and obviously RuneScape even more so, existed before I was at Jagex. I'm sure it'll probably exist beyond the time I'm at Jagex. Not that I've got any intention to leave,
but you're not going anywhere.
But RuneScape's like 23 years old now.
Yeah, that's wild.
That's hard to comprehend. Not many games get to say that. I'm looking at it like the success we're having with Old School, especially. It's not going to be anywhere. It's not going anywhere, right? In 2030, we'll still be here. In 2035, it starts to sound ridiculous. Will Old School still be a good product that exists on the internet in 2040? I mean, I'd hope so, and I don't really see anything to stop that train right now.
I think the only thing that might change that would be if there's any kind of notable shift towards technology people are using to play games with. If people move away from kind of sat down at playing at desktop. I know we've got mobile, but which is great. It's like an additional. People only play on mobile, but most people only use it accompanying desktop gaming. If we ever get to like a noteworthy shift towards things like VR or like maybe AR based games, all that kind of like all the tech changes, and if we keep up or don't keep up, or if our approach to things like monetization and game design, if they're still relevant with that, that's the only reason I can see Old School ever changing or maybe like falling into irrelevance.
Yeah.
But if that doesn't happen, I think Old School's going to be here for ages and ages.
And that's exactly my point, really. If it's here for ages, we have to look after it and make sure that the direction of travel for the game is good. We're just standing by it. My sort of philosophy is really every update we do, that's not to say we always achieve it, but every update we do should be ultimately making the game better.
Yeah.
Right? It sounds stupid, right? That's so simple. Of course it should.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we're doing updates because there's a need to almost feed the players, right? You're paying a monthly subscription. Of course you expect changes. You expect new content. Otherwise, why are you paying every single month to play the game? So in theory, one of my fears will ultimately be, what if the game's perfect? If the game is genuinely perfect, which obviously I don't think that's true. There's loads of flaws and loads of things we can work on. But if it was ever perfect, we couldn't update the game.
I get what you're saying. Sometimes I see people respond to some proposals we've got and they say they're just making work for themselves now to keep themselves busy. And I guess that is almost pretty much what you're saying.
And obviously, the game's in a really good spot.
Yeah.
There's loads of people in the team, loads of people in the community sort of think this is the new golden era, right? We are living in it right now. The game's thriving. There's so many players. Everything we do lately seems to go really well. But I don't think it's flawless. There's loads of problems, and obviously we're trying to be very thoughtful about the things we add. I get the sense that it does feel like we obviously are adding a lot.
Yeah.
But as I sort of say, like, I think people can expect content. You're paying to play every single month. Damn well you deserve content.
I think it's
we do less than 2007, right? Like,
yeah.
There's almost major updates every single week back then. I'd say nowadays it's more like we do quality of life most of the time, and then once a month,
a
major feature. And I think that's about right. The key thing I'm trying to instill the last several years is that everything we do needs to have purpose. There's a reason we're doing that. It's to solve this problem or cater to this audience who's underserved or whatever, right? We're not just doing stuff for the sake of it. And I think I don't want to be overly critical of anybody who was running RuneScape back in 2007, 2008, 2009. But to me, there were so many misses, so many pieces of content that launched and just were dead on arrival, as people would say, right? Because they just didn't really have that justification, that need to exist, or they were balanced inappropriately and those sort of things. I mean, you look to things like we just did, the Hunter Guild and the Hunter Rumors. I mean, that's almost directly trying to solve a problem. The whole Hunter skill, there's so much. It's actually really impressive, the scale of content that's there, right? Deadfall, traps, falconry, whatever, right? All the different kinds. And 90% of it went unused.
And then people might point to say, yeah, but summoning gave us its use, but then not really, because summoning was inherently flawed as well. So whilst in theory, it gave Hunter a use, it didn't really give all of Hunter a use. It gave the few things that you actually use summoning for. Most of summoning was also dead content.
Yeah, totally. There's a handful of familiars that were
Yeah.
useful to you with summoning. And obviously with Hunter, it devolves down to, well, chinchompers.
Yeah.
The thing is, you think about this, right? Like the way we think about balancing now, there's almost 3 basic sort of gears, levers, whatever you want to call it. And I sort of compare it to, some people talk about this sort of metaphor, this way to explain a problem. Like, you've got so much power, there's 3 light bulbs, and you've got to choose which light bulbs to power and how bright you want them to be. You can think about it in that way, right? If you want 2 skilling methods to exist alongside each other, there's 3 different light bulbs, and you can only have so much power to light them up. So one would be your XP rate. How fast are you gaining XP per hour? One would be sort of rewards or gold output, and maybe some combination of. So, like, essentially, one activity might be really lucrative monetarily. One activity might not be, and you can equate XP against rewards in that way. One activity could give you loads of money, but it might only be 30k XP an hour. One activity could give you no money, but be 100k an hour. And some people might actually choose to do the one that's lucrative for the reason that you get passive gold at the same time. But the third lever is intensity, or lack of it, AFK-ness. By using those, we can have content that lives alongside each other. Not everyone wants to go and do 2 tick-teaks for 100k, however many it is, 130, 140k XP. I don't want to sound stupid, I don't actually know. But it's quite high. But many people just want to go on AFK Redwoods. It's way less XP. So on one level, you could say, well, why on earth would you ever do Redwoods? It's low XP. AFKing matters to people. And so it is an important lever we should use to help balance things. Redwoods aren't dead. 2 tick-teaks aren't dead. They're both alive. They're both serving a purpose. They're both serving different people. And that's one thing I want to do with most of our skills, and make sure there is variety that helps to cater to people who want different things. But it needs to be balanced fairly, because you imagine if Redwoods were better XP than 2 tick-teaks, well, no one's doing teaks, right? Like, it kills it. And going back to Hunter, red chinchompers, I mean, I think most Hunters similar in intensity, probably. You're constantly managing traps. And then red chinchompers were obviously basically the only reward Hunter had that was incredibly powerful for the rest of your character. in obviously with respect to training ranged really fast. And it was also basically the best XP. So all of a sudden you've got this one method that completely decimates the skill. Why on earth would I be doing black salamanders? Like, you just don't need to. All the other stuff is just a means to an end to get to red chin jumpers.
Yep.
And obviously in old school, I think we made a massive mistake with birdhouses in a sort of similar sense. It was so powerful with how fast the passive XP is that you basically just didn't need to interact with hunter skill. You'd do you'd go to the museum, get your level 9, and then do birdhouses for a while.
Yeah, I think the only time I did Hunter on my iron was to get a high enough level to use the better birdhouse because I didn't want to wait for the passive XP.
Yeah.
So, and then I'll just let it happen passively. I also love how, just by the way, I was thinking in my head, you did the 3 light bulbs, and I was just thinking, Kieren really does love math. He's just turned game balance into a math equation.
That's what balancing is.
I know, but
It's a
it
bloody
just
spreadsheet.
clicked in my head. It was just like, yeah, he is the math man.
I always do love a good spreadsheet for
Yeah,
all
you
these
do.
things
I
out.
remember seeing many of them.
But yeah, so like stuff like Hunter Rumors is directly saying there's a problem with the Hunter skill. We all pay attention to what players tell us, of course. We use surveys every year, and players will give us a lot of information about what they're liking, what they're disliking, what they feel needs love. We also use data. So, we can look at our big data feeds and say, what ways are people training in the Hunter skill?
Mm-hmm.
We got this big chart that sort of showed 1 to 99 at each level. What method are people using to train? And it was something like 80% birdhouses for that middle chunk of the skill. You see stuff like red chin jumpers and herbivore blow up towards the end because people are caring about the pets as well. And then they're the most, when you're like 80 plus hunter, birdhouses drop off because it starts to feel slow and you want to do something intentional. But Hunter Rumors went to say, this is bad. People aren't training Hunter actively. Let's give them a way to actively do it and also breathe life into all this stuff that is just redundant. It's redundant really because of balancing, but Rumors was a way to sort of breathe life into it all in one fell swoop and provide a genuinely good alternative method for training throughout certainly the middle part of the skill, but all the way to 99 really. So, and this kind of coming back to that earlier point, like every project should be done with a specific purpose. Like there's a problem it's trying to solve. And so that, again, obviously feeding into that point that I think the game is better because of Hunter Rumors existing than it was before Hunter Rumors existed. Mm-hmm. And so it should always be with that sort of positive direction in mind. But I could keep talking, but it really does get into this sort of like, there's this bigger conversation that people often go to, like Easyscape. And there's lots of players who will criticize things like Gardeners of the Rift or Hunter Rumors because Easyscape is making the game faster, it's making the game easier. And I think it's quite a difficult conversation, really, because there's 2 things that can be conflated, right? One thing could be genuinely making it easier, right? You could go and up the XP rate of an existing activity, right? Let's say ZMI runecrafting, and you're just going up the XP rate. Obviously, maybe we do indirectly with new rewards, but you could just make it faster, and that pays such disrespect to the people who've come before you, already done the activity and trained the skill in that way. But something like Guns of the Rift, to me, is really just making runecrafting more accessible, right? Mm-hmm. People hated it. If you're stood there and like you got your runecrafting cape and you think, oh my god, I'm making up numbers here, but there's only 1,000 people with runecrafting in 99, which is obviously not true. That feels significant. Of course it does. There's only 1,000 people who have this thing. Dang, I'm cool, right? But the achievement of runecrafting being hard to get largely came from it being not fun.
Yeah, extremely dull.
It's not necessarily about the XP rate being faster now or not. It's largely about the methods being available that people are interested in. Mm-hmm. So Gardeners of the Rift isn't exactly fast. I mean, it's maybe fast compared to the really traditional runecrafting, but we've already had methods that are competitive in ZMI, and obviously you can do lavas for really fast XP, but no one did them because they're not fun. A lot of people don't find them fun. Some people do. That's good. That caters to them. Something like Gardens of the Rift just means runecrafting now caters to more people. It's not necessarily that Gardens of the Rift is coming in and saying, oh, we're 200k XP an hour, the runecrafting skill's now really fast. It's by adding this variety, it's making all the skills a bit more welcoming to people, which obviously in turn has the similar result in that you're going to have not just 1,000 people with runecrafting maxed. It's going to be more because the skill's more welcoming. And so I guess that's almost what I'm saying is we want to make things more welcoming via variety and better gameplay and more fun options, not by necessarily just upping the XP rates and making everything faster.
Let's think back to when there were only 1,000 people with 99 runecrafting. The motivation wasn't necessarily just to hit 99. That there was a lot of motivation because runecrafting at the time was really bloody rewarding because you were doing double nats. And when you were doing double nats in the early days of Old School RuneScape, you were balling. Now you're 99 runecrafting, you're making nothing. It's a means to an end. You get a max cape, and then you go do some PVM to get more money. Maybe that's like a missing motive. You mentioned the levers. Have we forgotten the kind of reward aspect of runecrafting and it's focused on accessibility instead?
This is kind of my point with the 3 levers, right?
Yeah.
To make a method good for gold, really, it needs to offer no XP or extremely little.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, people get it passively. So I think this is the one major shift in how people approach the game since like 2006. You go back then, a lot of skills made money. Runecrafting, obviously, particularly, was incredibly strong.
Yeah.
You could definitely pin a lot of the blame on drop tables and things lowering the price of nature runes and all that sort of stuff. But I think that is a valid argument, but it's not the whole picture. So many resources are now cheaper because people train skills. I think things like skill capes introduction long ago has shifted it massively. Almost everybody's slowly progressing to max nowadays. Right, a lot of people might not ever get there, but you go back to 2007, that was the rare thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the whole landscape of gaming has changed drastically over the last 10 years, especially. And if you compare 2007 to now, it's like back then, where were you getting information from on what the best way to train runecrafting was? Someone would tell you in game. There wasn't really much resources out there. The internet wasn't developed enough to have fantastic YouTube guides and efficient XP per hour methods. Gamers didn't care about efficiency either, whereas now everyone's obsessed with getting the most out of your time spent. So you are looking for the efficient methods. You are looking for the things that suit your play style, even if they don't exist from being developed, like Guardians of the Rift. So there are just generally more players that are interested in that. I remember when I played RuneScape back in the day, all I cared about was just walking into the wilderness because it was cool. It was something that wasn't offered in any other game, and that's what I did. I built accounts for that. I hated skilling. I hated questing. I hated all that. Now I love it. So
people felt like skilling was a choice, right?
Yeah.
People would almost identify, I'm a skiller, I'm a PVMer, I'm a PvPer. It's like, well, are you nowadays? You would say that's split between there's still a PvP community.
Yeah.
But I don't think you really get people who are saying I'm a PVMer versus I'm a skiller. Maybe there are other communities that want to go to
there are niche, smaller communities.
But they're at the very high end of those.
Nowadays, you really do everything, right? Like, if you want to be an endgame PVMer, you're probably going to max. You're still a skiller to that extent, at least. But what we think of as skillers now are the people who are going beyond 99s and going for 200 mils and so on, really. I'd say those people are probably the people who would identify as skillers. But yeah, the mindset's shifted so much. And so all these resources come into the game because more people are also passively training the skills. And so everybody going for 99 in a skill is going to mean more fish come in or whatever. Maybe that's a bad example because people do barbarian. But I think these things affect the money-making methods. Making D-hide for somebody is never going to make money because everyone's using it as a training method. You're not offering some sort of value to the economy because everybody can do it. So how do you make skilling make money? That is a challenge. It's a question I've asked myself, and I think it largely comes down to not giving XP for a process that's valuable. So it could be that, you take some resources, people want the output from those resources. That process has to involve extensive time or money, and not really give XP. Mm-hmm. And then I think you can start to get into territory where skills are offering profit. Things like double natures, I think, are still pretty good money. You can do it. It's not good XP, of course. No one's really doing it. It's just not competitive enough.
And you're considering time lost because that's you could make money from double nats, but it's now more efficient. You're weighing up the long term rather than the short term, which is I could do, or I could just do this faster method and then kill stuff quicker. And over the course of 100 hours, I'm saving time.
Yeah. And obviously part of it is on PVM drop tables, right? Runecrafting double natures was powerful and PVM didn't compete with it. You think that was an era pre-God Wars even?
I think that you have to go way, way, way back to look at a time when, let's say, like the kind of the artisan skills were lucrative. And you're talking like RuneScape Classic. You're talking like someone hitting smithing and having the only rune weapon in game.
Yeah, because there was no one else that was crazy enough to.
And there are very few games that do that now. I think the only one I can really think of, which I kind of still has that player run crafting is still really sought after and lucrative, would be games like Albion Online, because they've opted to have that player-driven economy. But then, and I haven't played it for a long time, so I'm going to look at the audience now and be like, I might be wrong, I'm sorry. There's no deluge of like PVM content. It is just, I am a cog in a machine of a player-driven economy. And I don't think our RuneScape players would want that. So we've chosen our path of game design, and it's kind of hard to veer away from it, I think.
The other big thing with PVM, I think, is that obviously you're not getting it. I mean, you do get some combat XP, but it's basically valueless to you. Mostly you're doing PVM when you already got 99s and your combat skills and
that's another thing. You'll AFK combats to get higher combat so that you can do combat faster because it's more efficient time spent. So
yeah,
that cycle continues.
There's a skill gate, there's an equipment gate. Equipment's really valuable because you also need it to go and do the harder encounters. Like it all fulfills itself. We do need to do more skilling though. I think there's more we can do, but I don't think there's this utopia that people think of or think back to what it was in the past. Like, I don't think that can really exist to that level. There might be elements we can introduce, but it's going to be a slow process for us to figure things out and start to add things. Yeah. Like people criticize smithing, of course, for the whole 99 to smith rune things. That used to be the big money maker, right? As you were saying, what would that look like today? Like, what is the solution to smithing? Do you introduce armors you can smith at level 80 that are endgame in power? Does that compete with PVM drops? Does it utilize PVM resources first and then you make it into real armor? Like, there's a bunch of challenges there because to me, it almost feels wrong to allow players to use their smithing skill to make armor that's better than like barrows. So how would that work? I feel like there's a conflict. So there's stuff for us to really solve and work out with where that can sit if we ever really want to meaningfully allow smithing to act in the capacity you want it to, in the sort of fantasy of smithing. It feels cool when you do it on Tutorial Island, and then you get to the real world, and it's like it's completely pointless almost. And
do you think it is solvable? Like we're 11 years into Old School RuneScape, slightly over. We've chosen our path of cool boss fights and awesome drops and gear, drop find monsters. Do you think it is solvable, or do you think it's like we can just try and mitigate it and make it as like less annoying, but it's never going to be that way?
Mitigate and find sensible solutions.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, I don't think, certainly with Old School, naturally conservative. People, it needs to remain familiar to that sort of 2007 feeling and vibe the game had. If the systems work completely differently to what you remember, I think there's going to be a problem. There's a conflict with us being Old School RuneScape at that point. That said, obviously, it's community driven. So if players want things, we'll obviously explore these things. But we probably don't have carte blanche to rip up smithing and completely do something different with it. It'll have to remain recognizable at the very least. So you probably can change requirements of things and to move rune down, for instance. It's what do you do later, as you say with PVM. So
that's moving requirements down kind of solves like the training, but it doesn't solve what's the point of smithing.
Yeah.
I
think you can maybe look at a few things we've done and change them. Not necessarily change them now, but going forward we can make a different decision. So there's a bunch of things that smithing is used for that are higher level. Making a Godsword blade from your shards, Dragon Fire Shield smithing, and so on, right? There's a few of those special things. And, people often make the joke, why do I need 99 smithing to do rune play bodies, but I can make a DFS at like whatever level? And I think there's still a logic to it. You've got the components. You're not making it from scratch sort of thing. But they're just tradable, and it takes 2 seconds to make it. So you go to the G, you could buy 3 Godsword shards for 150k each, or you could buy a blade for the same price combined. So it has no value, right? Like you getting whatever level it is, 70 smithing, 80 smithing, it's not meaningful to you as a main account at very least, because why would I care? It's not rewarding to me to get 80 smithing because I can just go to the Grand Exchange and buy it from another player who's already done it. There's no profit to be made either. So in theory, so I think this is where I come to that time investment thing. Imagine if you got the Godsword shards, the 3 Godsword shards, and to make it into the Godsword blade with, let's say, 80 smithing, took an hour, several hours even, like lots of steps, lots of effort to do it. It might sound tedious.
A little bit.
But would it be profitable? Right? Because no one's going to want to necessarily do that. So you might pay somebody to sort of have gone through that process for you,
time.
right? But that process would give you very little XP and so on. So like, can that be a solution? And we have to credit Mod Rice for coming up with some of these ideas and thinking about that. Like maybe that can be a route into it. Or also, and maybe combinations of these things, we make more things untradeable. So what if the Godsword blade was untradeable? Then all of a sudden getting 80 smithing is meaningful. But then there's this conflict because Iron Men get that gameplay already. And it does really help. I think skills feel really meaningful when you're an Iron Man. You get 90 Herblore, and oh my god, I can make super combats. That's so powerful. It's so useful to you. It makes it a really meaningful level to target.
On the flip side, you have to get 90 Herblore.
Yeah.
That journey can be painful on any skill.
and it's that's it, right? That's an extensive requirement to put on people. So if super combats were untradeable, and you think back to like overloads in RuneScape in 2008, 2009, whatever it was.
Herblore was a PVM skill. It was a combat skill essentially.
All of a sudden, Herblore was the most expensive skill in the game to train because everybody needed it.
Yeah.
Everyone wanted it. And mains had to do it. If you wanted to do endgame PVM, you had to have the capability to get whatever, 95, 96 Herblore to do overloads.
Yeah.
So
91's due up.
is that what we want? Because I actually think that's probably too extreme. So to go back to the example of Godsword blades, like if 80 smithing was required to make a blade and thus a Godsword, is that good? Now you need smithing to be able to go get Godswords, and maybe Godswords aren't what they used to be, right, in terms of PVM use. But
It's just a good example people are familiar with, yeah.
But yeah, and also mains, this again, it's just design direction stuff, is that mains don't necessarily want to be Iron Men, so they don't necessarily want this huge skilling demand for their progress to be there. But maybe you can sprinkle in a couple of important elements and so on. There's lots of untradeable requirements. I say untradeable because it's not necessarily always items, but you need 70 stats to do quests and get, and that's essentially an untradeable requirement. You can't buy that from somebody. If you want to get to the Elf City of Prifddinas, you need to do that quest. You need to get those requirements as a main account or as an Iron Man. So it's not that mains don't have to do skilling. It just feels like this is an arbitrary line that currently our design philosophy has generally been items, economy, you can just buy them. But maybe we can do things that will help.
I have a random idea that came to my head, and I'm going to preface this with, I don't like it, but I'm keen to hear your opinion on it, Kieren. All right. What if everything that you craft, there was an alternate version? Maybe there's 3 tiers of that item. There's like a perfect, a good, and a poor. Yeah. And the poor is the current stats that item has now. So let's take Black Dragon Hide as an example. And then the good one has slightly higher accuracy and some range strength. But the perfect one, they'd all have to look different in terms of their visuals, because obviously our game is based on, you see an item, you know exactly what it is, you know what stats it has. But there was a rare chance that you'd be able to create a perfect version of the item with higher stats, which would inevitably then sell for more. Could that potentially be an avenue that you could explore for better items for more profit?
I think if you were going to make the smithing process more thorough, more detailed, and that also that system allows for time investment to be a factor, right? Because you won't always produce a perfect version, so you might have to do it for many hours to get one that's good. So it could be. I think Old School's a simple game at its heart, and we've got this wrong a few times. Forestry was criticised for being too complex and not simple enough. I think I don't want to use the word. I don't want to simplify this argument too much, because that's quite a nuanced subject, really. What is too simple? What is too complex? And it's a bit ambiguous. And
we spoke a little about this in the previous podcast. Actually, it's like no one really knows what that line is that makes old school. It's just like a feeling that you have, and it's like people just get it, but you can't really explain it. It's like it doesn't feel old school, but it's like, what is old school? It's like it's old school.
I think the sort of direction I've been talking about with it is it should try to be as simple as it can be conceived.
Yeah, okay.
So like it should be a sort of direction we're aiming for, not necessarily like we can't necessarily easily factually say this is simple or this is complex, but like what's the simplest version of this design is the question I want to be asking ourselves ultimately. And so the smithing thing is like, it does add all these random complexity layers of, there's a visual component to it. How does that work? How many stats does it take? You need to look it up almost and understand what the difference is.
Yeah.
And then there's the other challenges of, there's not a lot of room, right? The differences between like green, red, blue, and black dragonhide ain't that big.
I remember with the rebalance, it was a pain in the backside trying to figure that out.
So where does the perfected version of green? You're essentially adding all these extra tiers of equipment, and we don't necessarily have room for that to exist. Maybe we could come up with things and ways to do it, but like I think you'd have to be adding some new strings to our sort of combat stats to really give us space to do that. I used to think quite a lot when I was a player. I was be the sad sort of player to sit there and think about game design and how we could add new systems.
But it's not
things.
sad, it worked out
Exactly,
well. Look at you now.
Well. It's training.
The old suggestions forums.
Yeah. But like I used to think, like, this is in the era when overloads were added, like, well, what could smithing do? What could smithing be a really powerful use for? And it's like, what if it was more like, hey, you've taken your Bando's arm and you want to add a couple of extra spikes to it and you use a smithing skill to do that and you buff its stats that way, right? You know, so sort of taking existing gear and then modifying it with your skills. And then you could do a similar thing to overloads where like 85 smithing is now required for making your Bando's armor, which was best in slot. The best, even better.
Is that
but
the
it's
direction
the same problems?
RuneScape went with Invention? I haven't
Invention did something similar, but
Yeah.
obviously it was all within the invention skill rather than on other skills. But that I don't think that was with stats, but it was with applying
effects and stuff.
effects. So that obviously again that is a valid way you can go. That's not stats. So even if you're using that idea of like, you know, regular, good, perfect gear, you could use effects to do that. But I feel like effects are not the right direction for old school either.
Introducing new rewards is hard enough with effects and stuff.
I kind of want to ask a bit of a different question now, just to throw a bit of a spanner in the works, but it's still kind of related to community. You've been a creator, you've played the game for many years. I know that I'm not sure if you're still actively playing, but I know you were playing your group Iron Man quite consistently. What's it like working on the game and then playing it at the same time? Does it make it better, worse? What's your experience?
I've been playing so much since Group Iron Man came out.
Yeah.
Like I maxed my main old school account. God, when was it? It must have been early 2020 or something like that. I then basically stopped playing for a good while. I played Trailblazer League and got Dragon Rank in that. But obviously that was a bit of a short burst for the league, and then I stopped again. And when Group Iron Man came out, I've been playing since then, basically non-stop, and I've racked up like 180 days of playtime since Group Iron Man came out. And I'm closing in on max on my Group Iron Man now. So I've been playing a lot. I would say I enjoy playing quite a lot now, but I'm spending less time in-game at work.
Okay.
So you think before when I'm developing or even QA, you're consistently in-game playing content, trying out content. Nowadays, when Tombs of a Mascot comes out, yeah, I've play tested it, but I haven't been intimately testing and developing that content every single day for a span of months. So like, I feel like I can appreciate it a lot more now, and
you can get a bit more of that fresh experience. I guess.
It's still, it feels a little bit more like it would as a player. It's obviously not the same, but comparatively at least. But it's amazing how you forget. Like I come back to playing things like Chambers of Xeric and doing Ulm, which I made, and you just kind of forget. Obviously, that's a long time ago. But it's like you kind of put it to one side. You're not even thinking about the fact I designed this mechanic, and I'm just like everybody else. I'm like, for fuck's sake, like this is I've just been killed by essentially my own mechanic. And I don't even think like that. I'm just acting like a player would, really.
Past you was in it for you. It was out for you.
Past me has got one over me.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really come to my mind. I mean, maybe for other people it does, but maybe it's
like
the time frame involved.
Now, right, for Chambers, so
yeah,
it's quite a long time actually.
I still think it's ridiculous. I've learned so much. I've worked on so many things since. I was just a junior designer. Junior content dev when I did it all, and I still look at that boss fight like that's the best one I did.
It's incredible. I do love that when you finally get to Ulm. I'm not a huge fan of Chambers. Like I don't know. I think it's just I've not spent enough time there, but I love the Ulm fight in particular. It is very fun. It's so interactive as well. There's always something happening.
Yeah.
So it just makes it enjoyable. What would you say is the project that you least liked working on?
Least like.
Yeah, you've done so many fantastic updates. Players know you for your incredible PVM releases, obviously Inferno, Chambers, Grotesque Guardians. But what did you just hate doing?
What did I hate doing? There's elements of every project you hate.
Oh, okay.
Because sometimes you get into the sort of. Sometimes you have to get into the code and have to deal with a lot of awful old code or a lot of data entry stuff, and that side's always a bit whatever. Like, for example, we wanted a feature where you could left-click cook on ranges.
That took you forever. Not in a bad way.
Yeah.
I just remember
Yeah.
that was okay. I'm going to let you answer it, but yeah, I remember being blown away by every time you
It
report
kind of
back.
feels ridiculous now to think
Yeah,
that we
yeah.
didn't used to have that.
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
you used to have to use fish on the range every single time.
It's all decentralized code, right?
It was all separate code.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was, it was all over the place, basically. There was different code for the lumberage range. There's loads of weird exceptions, obviously, for the cooking gauntlet. So it was all over the place. And to really do it nicely, like the problem is, when you click on a range, we need to run some code that checks what items do you have in your inventory that you could potentially be wanting to cook right now. In theory, you could go up to the bloody range of 28 different cookable items. And we probably want to make it at least handle that situation.
Yeah.
I think the way it handles it is just picks the first 10 and puts it on the UI for you. But like we have to think about that. When the player uses a fish on the range, we already know what you're trying to cook. So we don't have to worry about it. It simplifies it massively. And so that's why a lot of the code had to be changed, because it wasn't written in a sort of format where you could peruse loads of data really easily. It was just hard scripted all over the place. So I had to do it. I had to then put this all in a proper data format that I could then go through, check all the items in your inventory against, and go from there. So the code's a lot better now, but it does take time when you're doing that sort of stuff. So like, I wouldn't say I hated it, but like you get those tedious tasks sometimes. On a bigger level, the project I probably hated to do most is Volcanic Mine. I'm not happy with it. I'm actually quite happy with how it turned out. I think it's really good. A lot of people sort of complimented it as, at the time, one of the most fun skilling activities in the game. But I got thrown onto it. So I think it's part of the dynamics of how development works sometimes, really, is that projects take longer than they should, or vice versa. I just wrapped up Inferno, I think. It might have been. Was it Inferno?
It must have been,
been.
because we went pretty much from Inferno into Fossil Islands.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Fossil Island was kind of brewing in the background.
Yeah.
And the team was much smaller. We didn't really have a production process at all.
Yeah.
It was pretty pants on the back end of like how we managed projects and stuff. I do remember like there being some kind of meeting, and we didn't need a meeting room because the Old School team was that small. We had the big whiteboard behind us.
Yeah.
And we were like, okay, we want to ship this update, Fossil Island, by this time, late 2017, I think it was. Maybe. Oh God, I'm losing. Yeah, it was late 2017. What do we need to move around to get stuff to happen? Yeah. And then I think that's how you ended up going straight on back to that.
We needed another resource, somebody to pick up that part of the project while the rest of Fossil Island was still being made, and that's fine. Like I think that's still part and parcel of how we end up working today. Like things slip, things take longer. You need to move people around so that you get the right people on the right things, and so on.
But now we're better. We have contingency plans to do that in advance.
I'd say it's more thought through fully now with a bigger plan. But when the team only had like 5 content developers, it was a lot more straightforward to kind of not need to rely on an extensive process, though we would have benefited from one anyway. So I got drafted onto Volcanic Mine. It's probably not a project that would come to mind as like I really desperately want to work in that in the first place. But then also when you factor in like I've been drafted onto it sort of last minute, I'm like, oh my God, it's already a moving project. I need to get hold of this. Volcanic Mine, I think you had the map largely put down, but the design in terms of what do we want to do with it was so loose. We had a very loose idea of the concepts of how this thing would work. So I had to take all these different parts and try and form something out of it that worked as a sort of skilling training activity. So it was quite difficult. Obviously, I didn't have a huge amount of time to sort of get it together. And obviously, skilling isn't necessarily something that comes back naturally to me more. So I'm more known for doing PVM content, and that's definitely more my forte.
I think earlier as well, you spoke about now that in your new role, in your current role rather, you get to have some kind of loose vision, and then you entrust people in your team to go and run with it, and they can change it, they can innovate, they can adapt it. Whereas, if I remember rightly, Fossil Islands, we had the vision holder, and they were really quite, and no disrespect to them because they love Fossil Islands, but they were really quite loath to see anything change from what they initially envisioned, which I imagine probably pigeonholed you quite a lot in terms of what you could actually do with the mine.
To be fair, I think I had the benefit of a lot of flexibility, really, with Volcanic Mine. But I had a lot of restraints in terms of this is the map I've got already, and a few concepts like that. But that didn't cause too much issue, I don't think, with certainly with Volcanic Mine. But it's quite hard to do something like that, and doing any sort of group content, certainly group content that can be of arbitrary size, and trying to make it all work. And in the end, I don't think it's quite right. Like, at the end of the day, the meta for Volcanic Mine is beginning to do 3 to 5 man teams, and in reality, there's 3 massive channels with. And if you go in a big enough team, it spawns 3 boulders rather than 1, and no one really does it, which suggests I've got something wrong fundamentally with the balancing somewhere. And like, maybe we could correct it, right? We could always do that with a rebalance, like Project Rebalance, and improve those sort of things. But like, then you're also asking yourself, well, what's the benefit of doing that? A lot of people are enjoying Volcanic Mine as is. Should we not just embrace that
and introduce
Do we
a new
need
method
to fix
instead?
it just because
we
intended to? I always get a bee in my bonnet when we constantly going about like, that's not a bug, it's just not what we intended and all that stuff. It's like, to me, it almost doesn't matter.
Yeah.
What's out there in the game is what's out there in the game, and whether players enjoy it or dislike it is really what we've got to base our opinions on. So, for instance, I come to the example of the Muspa walk, if you know what I'm on about, where you sort of step back and you were able to make it hit zeros. Obviously, it was a bug, right? Like, I think most people can probably interpret that was a bug. But a lot of people liked the mechanic and that there was a bit of skill involved to dodge something.
You mess it up, take damage, you don't.
So,
Sweet.
In the end, we ended up allowing it to stay. But I think that's a good example of something where it's like, I don't care about what our intention is. Like, once it's out there, it's out. Let's understand it as it is, because the situation's changed. We're not pre-launch anymore. It's in game.
Unless it's horrifically game breaking, of course.
Yes.
But, in those instances, I think most players end up accepting the fact that changes happened. Has there been an instance of like, let's say, quote unquote bug that was in the game that wasn't an intended feature, players used it, we removed it, and it's still removed, but you wanted it kept in? Any examples of those you can think of?
I don't think anything comes to mind, to be honest.
Okay. Honestly, I thought you were going to go with the Muspa one originally anyway, but you kind of brought that up. So
yeah,
we
and I think we actually
did.
We did remove it and then put it back, I think.
Yeah, it didn't take long. I think it was a couple of days after removing it. There was like a huge amount of feedback to say we should bring it back, and then obviously we did. So
I think that's sort of modified our thinking a little bit. I always think about it in terms of our boss design. Like, again, I come back to like Ulm and how sort of the sort of like semi unintentional jank that it has, that permits some of the running head strategies and so on, create some of the best moments in our combat, right? The way you can use Verzik and you step back and step in to sort of dodge and force it to use certain attacks, like that stuff's great. It's not necessarily what was in the head of the designer when it was created, but that's fine. And that's the sort of message I keep on giving to the team, is that your natural instincts as a designer is to try and make this perfect thing.
Choreographed fight,
choreographed. It's exactly what you set out to create. People interact with things the way you intended them to interact with it. But you're losing so much of it there.
Oh yeah, you lose so much. The emergent gameplay, I think, is what makes Old School so unique and special. And you look at Chambers of Xeric strategies from when it released to now, they've drastically changed. Obviously, the last few years not so much because it's kind of figured out now. But the whole running head,
is introduced, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. New gear makes it a different way you can approach it. But running the head, the fact that you can solo it, you can solo challenge mode. Back when challenge mode was initially released, people weren't efficiently soloing it, and now people will choose to efficiently solo it because it's preferred by them. And that wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for emergent gameplay. Akka, Butterfly, you have the red Xing on Baba, which I don't think is as necessary now with some of the changes, but people still choose to do it. And I like that, and I really like that we keep that in my opinion as well. As long as I said, it's not game breaking.
As long as it's not harming anything fundamentally. Like, there's obviously sometimes there's balancing concerns. Like, we need people to have to use food and supplies at some point. So if a mechanic completely allowed you to negate everything, maybe it's too much. So you'd have to try and think about it sometimes. And sometimes it means we have to be the bad guy in the room and come in and say, look, sorry, you can't have your free no supply runs.
Yeah.
We need to do something about it because that's too...
Because if we don't do that, we're just delaying another problem, which is we allow it, and then they say, basically what we talked about earlier with smithing, what's the point of cooking?
Yeah.
Or what's the point of fishing and cooking and that type of stuff?
Or you just make content so easy that the rewards are so farmable that they're not worth anything. It's like, oh, this is dead content. No one wants to pay for money for the rewards now. So there has to be a balance in everything, right?
Yeah, totally. It's all about juggling getting that balance quite right. But you need
the 3 light bulbs.
We need to understand it. Like, you need to understand the interactions that are going on. If every bit of PVM content in the game didn't use food, then food's worthless.
Yeah.
So you do need to train food somehow, and just mistakes isn't enough because people are too good. People are so much better now than they were when we released stuff 10 years ago as well.
Oh, that brings up such a good question. Chip damage.
Yeah.
It's such a contentious thing at times within the community. I remember, I think the first time that it was properly introduced was in the Theatre of Blood with Verzik Final Phase, right? It was like you would take damage. Oh, no, we've changed that since, but initially you would take damage from the magic and range attacks, even if you were praying.
You couldn't pray after it was fired. So,
So you would still get hit.
It's similar to how Alm works. So Alm kind of probably did it first. I don't think we ever changed Alm. But even on Alm, like stuff like you take a magic hit, even with pray magic up, you still take
some damage. Yeah,
you take less, a lot less. But
it's more present on classic bosses. People like Cowpack Queen, right? It's probably the prime example. So it's not something that came with a raid. It's just old stuff. Even God Wars, like you're still going to get hit through your prayer.
Yeah. So my take on it is ultimately like to some extent it's a necessary evil that we need to people to take damage.
Yeah.
But a good version of it means the player is still empowered to do something about it that should better their situation. Right. You should have tools, whether it's, whatever it is, standing in the right place, praying the right thing, do something that makes your situation better and helps you solve a problem that you're facing. It might not remove all the damage, but so I think Verzik's a good example. You change to the right pray, good. You've benefited, you've helped the situation. It's even the same at Alm, right? If you're praying magic, you still take some, but it's minimal. And then it's all good things in the right balance, right? It's easy for chip damage to be too much. If it's hitting 20s, you're going to be going through supplies nonstop. If it's 2, 3s, like small damage, it adds up, and it forces you to still have to think about supplies, but it isn't going to debilitate you. So
I think most of the time as well, we want people to use supplies probably in between kills. So as long as it's not massively disrupting your current kill, and you have to take the break between respawn time, and that's when you eat, and then it just maybe arbitrarily shortens a trip, but it gives food a purpose.
Yeah, totally. And Arcane's learned quite a lot, I think, on some of the encounters he's done recently, and talked a little bit about it to me, and that give people the time to heal, because the cost of healing is less DPS, right? You eat food, you can't attack for a little bit. So having natural breaks in a fight where you can eat food without punishment is quite powerful.
That's actually a really good point, because it does make the encounters feel infinitely better. I know that Duke gets a lot of slack because of the prep, but one thing I really appreciated about fighting the Duke was that when it comes to the eye phase, it's a perfect time for me to just eat one piece of food and catch back up if I need to, because I'm not going to miss out on anything doing that. Whereas if I was chugging brews in the middle of a Verzik fight because I've been terrible on my prayers, which I know obviously you can avoid, but that then feels bad because I'm losing damage. There's no real opportunity to actually heal.
Yeah.
You just have to play it properly. So
I think
it's very interesting.
Another example being Alm, every time you knock the head down and it goes to the other side, there's a small phase of crystals falling.
Yeah,
you still take damage, but you're not dealing DPS. You can just sit and it brew up and get your health back.
But then on the flip side, you have to balance that out too, because you can't have too much downtime, because then you're just arbitrarily drawing out the fight, and making it longer. I remember in the original Theatre of Blood design, we were talking about a shield phase for Verzik. I know we have that now, but you can damage through the shield, but that was an immunity period, and we sacked that off, right? Because it was players are just going to complain that they have to sit for 30 seconds to a minute and just doing nothing, and no one likes doing that during a fight. So,
and I've learned a lot. A lot of people always criticize Grotesque Guardians for a lot of reasons, and we've made a number of changes over the years, but I know there's things I got wrong on that fight, with how long the downtimes were, but with the little purple and orange lightning phases and so on, that were just arbitrary. The cutscenes at the start and everything, and even then, I still think to this day you have to get 5 kill count before you can skip it. Stuff like that, where it's like, right, people can probably understand why we did that, but at the end of the day, it's kind of stupid. Right? It just is an arbitrary thing. It's like, you must see our creative cutscene. You must watch it. How much cooler and immersive is it? It's like, yes, that matters to an extent.
Yeah, once you're there, like
it shouldn't
50
be
kills.
interfering with something that's just annoying.
Yeah.
50 kills, 100 kills across maybe thousands across going for the pet and stuff. I can understand why people call it the prison. The stone prison or whatever people call it, right? So we have to learn these things and make sure our boss designs are better and take these things into account.
Well, Kieren, heard a lot about, we're getting under the crown, which is what we set out to do, but a lot about your perspective on the design, which is brilliant because you're the design director. But I'd love to know more about you before we wrap up. Like, I think the audience was the players watching, and we hope they're watching. We really are. We really hope we've got like 10 people watching, please. What's next for Mod Kieren? So you went from QA to content dev, design director. Long-term future, are we saying Jagex? What's next on your agenda?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any intention to leave anytime soon.
Okay.
I see a future here. We've built something awesome, but I still think there's so much more to keep on doing. I think we've got exciting things on the horizon, obviously like sailing. It's like, I want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of what we go to and build after that, and make sure that the game's in a really good direction, and it's that journey is well on its tracks, and we'll maintain it. If I ever go, I want to be able to trust that will continue. But yeah, for me, it's just about staying here, continue to make sure I influence things in the right way, and continue to build my team in the design team on Old School. Because I think, if anything, I can look back and say I made awesome things in the game, like Ulm or Inferno or whatever, and be really proud of those things. But nowadays, I actually think one of the things I'm most proud of is the hiring, training, and guiding of the team. And it makes my job so much easier when we've got an awesome set of people who are working on it. People like Mod Kieren. I'm not going to start listing names because that'll leave people out.
No, you just listed one. Arcane number
Mod
one.
Kieren alone, and everybody else is shit. No, I'm kidding.
Well, I'm sure HR will be calling you up soon enough.
But obviously, there's so many awesome people in the team, and they're ultimately what makes my job easy.
Yeah,
because they're all creative. They all have amazing ideas for the game, and they want to bring their things to life. And so, like, in terms of what I've done, recruiting well, helping to train, helping to guide. And I think at this point, I'm already really buzzing with how well that's all gone. And obviously, these things take years, really.
I think it's very noticeable working in CM, being so close with the dev team. It's by far and large, like, so much, like, saying better makes it sound like it was really bad before, but it's not. It was everyone was great before, but now you can tell everyone is so passionate, so knowledgeable. Working with them in collaboration is so much easier than it ever has been before. It's also hard because we're doing more than we have before, and we're communicating more than we have before. But credit to you and the team, because they've definitely made it. Just the last 2 years have just been awesome to work alongside with everyone. There's such a buzz around content. I'm so excited for Game Jam as well. I have one last question that's more related to you. What would be your dream job if not working on Old School?
I'd love to be like a football manager.
Okay. All right.
Like, I definitely don't have the skills to do it.
I can imagine a proper Mike Bassett style approach. Yeah.
This is where I zone out now.
But that reference,
you guys are just going to
that reference we lost on anyone. I said beforehand, I'd happily talk football with Kieren for an hour. Like,
I'm a massive
official
Newcastle.
Old School football podcast.
Perfect. We should ask everyone their team. But yeah, I'm a massive Newcastle fan. I'm a big fan of football generally. So it would be an awesome thing to do. And it's like, sometimes I look at it like you listen to podcasts of football managers talking, ex-football managers, pundits talking, and so on, about leadership styles, how different managers ran their dressing room with the squad of players. And you can draw parallels, right? Like, it's a very different environment to, you've got a bunch of athletes at the sort of top of their careers competing for something that's incredibly difficult to win, and you're trying to get the best out of them. But there's obviously still parallels to, we want to get the best out of the Old School team and make the best things happen here. So, like, you can draw things from it, but like, it's really interesting because it's just so cutting edge with respect to leadership. The things they need to care about are so different.
a lot of egos to manage as well.
But I think it'd be quite a fun thing to be able to do, and obviously your job might be it's so varied as well doing that.
I think it's time
That'd
for
be
you to
quite
set
fun.
up a little Sunday league.
I was going to say,
your own
we've
team.
got a couple of tournaments coming up for
Yeah.
Jagex. One, come along and, do the Fergie style of management.
It wouldn't be my approach to be the sort of aggressive character for sure.
Sweet. Maybe that's one of the angles that this podcast brings is like we ask people what their dream job is and then we make those dreams happen.
Okay.
We can get Mod Kieren as a football manager. We can let Arcane be a postman for the day.
Yeah.
We have so much post coming into the office.
There's
We're
a
like,
lot. yeah.
Arcane, you're not developing today. Sorry, Kieran. Whatever project you were managing him on, not happening no more.
We make dreams happen.
Yeah, we make dreams happen. Okay, well, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us, Kieran. Do you have anything else that you want to say before we wrap up?
Do I have anything else to say? Thank you for listening, really. This has been a buzz. I've really enjoyed doing this.
Good.
Buzzing to be doing podcasts.
That was my next
generally,
question.
and-
Was
Yeah.
did you have fun?
Yeah,
I feel
yeah.
like we could get you on 5 more times and still have things to
I'm
say.
sure there's loads of
which
things I
is
could still
a
talk
fantastic
about.
position to be in.
I
so.
wanted so badly to know more about Fairy Tales RS, but I'll save that for next time.
Yeah,
Yeah, we'll go into Mod Kieren exposed, but in the positive light.
yeah.
So cool. Well, yeah, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you all enjoyed this one, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Thank you for having me.
Bye bye.
See ya.